Our next lesson is lesson 56, Common Denominators, part 2. Back in lesson 55, we were adding and subtracting fractions that did not have common denominators. In doing so, we have to rename one of the fractions in order to either add or subtract. Today we're going to be looking at lesson 2, or part 2 of this lesson, where we have to rename not one fraction, but both of them before we add or subtract them. This is necessary sometimes in order to complete a problem that has uncommon denominators. So the process is to find a common denominator of both fractions. Let's begin today by taking a look at two different fractions that we're going to add together. We're going to take the fractions of 1/2 and add together to 1/3. One of the easiest ways of setting up a problem like this is to write them one on top of another, which we'll do here, and then set it up to add. In doing so, we can take the problem and write it out in a horizontal fashion. The first thing we know is we're going to have to multiply each of these fractions by another fraction that is equal to 1 in order to find a common denominator. When we look at both denominators, 2 and 3, we want to find a lowest common denominator of both of those numbers. Looking at both of them, we can eyeball that to be 6. So we know our target is 6 for a denominator. We're going to multiply the first fraction, 1/2, times a number, which will then equal 6. So in order to do so, we know that 2 times 3 will equal 6. So we will also make that be 3 in the numerator. We will then multiply 1 times 3 and have a new fraction of 3/6. In the second fraction, we know that we can multiply 2 times 3, or 3 times 2, to equal 6. And then we do the same thing in the numerator, and that gives us a fraction of, adding together now, 3/6 and 5/6. We now have common denominators, and we know that our fraction will equal 5/6. Let's take a look at another problem like this as well. This time we're going to take a subtraction part. We're going to take the fraction of 3/4 and subtract that from 2/3. Again, when we line up our fraction in this vertical fashion and then write out our problem in a horizontal manner, it helps us to see what it is that we are getting in the end. So we can set up our problem like this. We know we multiply it times a fraction that is equal to 1 that will have a common denominator of both 4 and 3. In looking at 4 and 3, we need to find the least common denominator of both numbers. Eyeballing that, we know that 12 is that common denominator. So we're going to put our 12s in the denominator format. Here we know we have to multiply 4 times the number to equal 12. We know that is to be 3. We will also do the same thing in the numerator form. 3 times 3 will equal 9. Down here, we know that 3 times 4 will equal 12. We'll do the same in the numerator format. 2 times 4 will equal 8. When we see this problem added or subtracted from each other, we're going to note the fraction that we receive now will be a lesser number. 8 from 9 equals 1, and our denominator stays as 12. We don't have to change the denominator once we've done that. Now, renaming fractions like this can also help us when we are doing comparative fractions, like, for example, 4/6 and 5/6. We know that the fraction 5/6 is greater, therefore it is a larger fraction. Let's take a look at a couple of others that are very similar to this. We'll take the fractions of 3/8 and we will compare that to the fraction of 1/2. Now we can use our manipulatives to help us with this, as that will make things a lot easier sometimes, but we'll do this in this format. We're going to rename each of these fractions to a denominator that is equal to both. In this case, 8 is a common denominator to both 8 and 2. So this fraction of 3/8 is going to stay the same, but this fraction of 1/2 we're going to multiply times another fraction to give us a denominator of 8. We know that to be 4, so we'll do the same thing in the numerator format, and we have 4/8. So now, when looking at our new fractions here, we have 3/8 and 4/8, and it's very apparent that 4/8 is larger. We will read that as 3/8 is less than 4/8. Another type of fraction in that same way, which we will now rename both of those fractions, is 2/3 compared to 3/4. Again, let's take a multiplication times a fraction equal to 1. We'll go both ways on this to give us our new numerator. The numerators between 3 and 4, common denominator of both of those numbers, again, the lowest form of that would be 12, as we learned from a previous lesson. 3 times 4 we know is 12, which means we also have to put the numerators for 2 times 4 is 8. On the other side of there, 3 times 4 is 12. We put the same thing here and get 9 twelfths. Let's cross these out just to keep them out of the way here. We are now comparing 8 twelfths to 9 twelfths. We know that 9 twelfths is larger. So 8 twelfths is less than 9 twelfths. That's how we will read that. Another format that we can do with this is to also take these fractions and reduce them. That means to write them in lower terms. When doing so, we would have fractions of 2/3 compared to 3/4, as that's what the reduced fraction of that would be. We still look at that in the same way and know that that is the process, that 2/3 is less than 3/4.